Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We're so happy you're joining us today, not only to celebrate the Moon Festival, but also to celebrate the lure of the Chinese snuff bottle. My name is Lily Chang. I'm the chair of the board of the San Diego Chinese Historical Museum, also the founding director of the San Diego State Chinese Culture Center. We're so pleased to have our former director, Lily Doe Birmingham, who will serve as the moderator for today's wonderful talk. Thank you so much. Lily B.
Lily, are you there?
Lily B, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Did you hear our welcome remarks?
No.
Okay, let's do it again. Wonderful meeting all of you over the Zoom. My name is Lily Chang. I serve as the chair of the Chinese Historical Museum of San Diego. I'm also the founding director of the Chinese Culture Center at San Diego State University. We welcome all of you to this wonderful presentation of the beautiful snuff bottles. And I'm going to introduce our former director, Lily Doe Birmingham, who is going to serve as the moderator for today. Again, happy Moon Festival. Welcome all of you to this wonderful presentation.
Thank you, Lily Chang. I'm Lily Birmingham. I'm the moderator today. Today, our topic is in Flagrante Collecto, caught in the act of collecting, the lure of the Chinese snuff bottle. Our presenter is Courtney McGowan. But before we start, we're going to talk a little bit about our business. So in the Chinese Museum, our upcoming events are as follows. October 21st, Zodiac Heads from the Garden of Perfect Brightness and the Negotiation of Cultural Heritage. It will be presented by Dr. Patricia Yu. This garden in Chinese is Yuanming Yuan, or the old summer palace. It was destroyed during the Second Opium War, and there's stories about the zodiac heads in the garden that were looted. So they're incredible stories. I think you'll be very interested in this presentation. And November, we have snuff bottles from San Diego presented by Claire Chu. Claire is our guest curator for the wonderful snuff bottle exhibition that's on display right now. So it serves as a continuation of appreciation of snuff bottles after today's presentation. I hope you will join us. Next. We have two programs that were on before the COVID, and now we resumed these two programs. One is the Asian Pacific Historic District Walking Tour on October 1st. It's the first Sunday each month. We have this walking tour, 11 o'clock, and it will be led by a docent. And we hope you will join us, register online. Another one is a book club. It will be the last Saturday, 1 p.m., October 28th is our next one. The book to read is Rabbit on a Bumpy Road by Tom Hum. Tom Hum is a politician. He was the first person to become the first non-Caucasian elected to the San Diego City Council in 1963. So it's a wonderful memoir about him overcoming his challenges in his life. So I think you will enjoy this book. Next, our program, this Chinese American Experience and Beyond, is sponsored by Plus Charitable Trust, and the Xi family. Next. Here is about our current exhibition, Miniature Treasures of the Qing Dynasty and Beyond. It's on display right now. We have over 120 bottles. We also have calligraphy, Chinese paintings, and some other collectible items on display. We hope you can join us. It will be through February next year. And we would appreciate any support for our programs in the museum. And if you can do that, you can go online to our sdchm.org and look for this, help us and look for the QR code. Next. Okay, next is Yudan from the Chinese Cultural Center. She would tell us what's going on over there.
Thank you, Lily. Hello, everyone. Happy Saturday. My name is Yudan Wang from San Diego State University Chinese Culture Center. I'm very happy here to announce upcoming event from the Chinese Culture Center. We have a photo exhibition about Tibet from September 4th to September 29th. It's in our center. There are many wonderful photos and videos about Tibet. And we're looking forward everyone to visit our center and to see the photos. Next page, please. We are gonna have an event at the center to celebrate the Moon Festival. It's gonna be September 23rd, 11:30 to 1:30 p.m. We're gonna have a fun activities, make moon cake, origami, storytelling, and some snack and tea. More important, we have student performance there. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Please check our website and sign up for the event. And next page, please. Okay, here are the guidelines for today's virtual lecture. First, after the presentation, if you have question or comment, please raise your Zoom hand or write your question in the chat box. Our co-host Elizabeth will call on you when it's your turn. Before our program start, we're gonna take a group picture. And at that time, please turn your camera on just before at the group picture time. And after we took the group picture, the lecture gonna begin. Please turn your microphone and your camera off. Thank you. I think that's the good time for our group pictures. Okay. Come to the gallery and beautiful smile. 1, 2, 3. Hey. 1 second. All right. Thank you so much. We have a great picture, group picture. Now I'm going to turn back to Lily B.
Okay, I'm back. As I said, our presentation today is In Flagrante Collecto, Caught in the Act of Collecting, the Lure of the Chinese Snot Bottle. I will introduce our presenter, Courtney McGowan, and our discussant, Richard Liu. And let's start. So Chinese snot bottles are fun to look at, and it's probably even more fun to handle it. And I think that's how Courtney got caught in this fever of collecting snot bottles. I got to know Courtney through the Asian Arts Council of the San Diego Museum of Art. Courtney McGowan refers to herself as a recovering politician, having served for 8 years in the Nevada State Assembly prior to moving to Coronado. Since joining the Coronado community, she has served on a number of boards and commissions. Across the bridge in San Diego, Courtney has chaired the Asian Arts Council of the San Diego Museum of Art and has co-chaired its study group and the programs group. She currently co-chairs the Asian Arts Council programs group. She has also been on the board of the Mingei Museum for over 10 years. Discussing with her after her presentation will be our discussant, Richard Liu. Richard is a recently retired architect and preservationist of historical buildings in Los Angeles, Chinatown. He became interested in snuff bottles after purchasing a few contemporary inside painted bottles in Chinatown, and the passion to collect continues for over 35 years. His collecting interests include Chinese glass and mid-century paintings by Asian American artists. He's a current board member of the International Chinese Snuff Bottle Society and president of the Snuff Bottle Collectors of California. Both Courtney and Richard are snuff bottle collectors, and Courtney collects many other things. She's especially fond of textiles. Her other interests, as we said, Chinese snuff bottles. She also loves Naga and Turkmen traditions. Courtney received a BA from Finchley College and an MA in art history from Columbia University. It is with my great pleasure to introduce my friend Courtney McGowan to you. Courtney, please take over.
Thank you very much, Lily. It is a pleasure to be here and to present this lecture, In Flagrante Collecto, Caught in the Act of Collecting, the Lure of the Chinese Snuff Bottle. And our cover slide is a crystal bottle, a superbly hollowed, virtually flawless stone that dates to 1780 to 1850. A superb example of just a beautiful, beautiful snuff bottle. And I admit it, I'm an inveterate collector and have been since I was a child. And yes, it is an addiction, sometimes something which must be understood and controlled before it takes over your life completely. But for me, it's a form of continuing adult education, which I find enormously enriching. Hopefully, I can share some of that with you all today. When I collect something like Chinese snuff bottles, I start by getting hold of the best written sources of information available, and I read them. In this case, I was also told about the International Chinese Snuff Bottle Society by a snuff bottle dealer in Hong Kong in 1980 on my first trip to China. He encouraged me to join the organization. Next. That has proved a great resource of both excellent information as well as access to the best snuff bottle dealers in the world. I've met incredible people from all over the world and attended our yearly conferences in places near and far. Last year's was in San Francisco, and this year's will be in Lisbon, Portugal. My son, Sean, really likes my snuff bottles, so he will be joining me in Portugal in October. What I love about snuff bottles is the variety of materials and styles, as well as the incredible workmanship involved in producing these exquisite miniatures. You can find examples, next. You can find examples from a very large, very ornate, heavily carved precious stone like this, vibrant pink tourmaline bottle, carved in high relief with boys playing on the sides, one holding a chime, another flying a kite, a third holding a coin, and the fourth with a stem of millet. The aquamarine stopper is also carved with two boys. When rubbed, tourmaline produces pyroelectricity and was considered to have magical properties. It was imported both from Sri Lanka as well as the US, from the Pala mines here in San Diego County. Tourmaline was the favorite gemstone of the Empress Dowager Cixi. Next. In contrast, here is the most humble of materials, a tiny olive stone, simply carved in low relief on one side with cavorting squirrels on leafy fruiting vines, 1780 to 1900. This one came from the Mary and George Block collection and is now part of my collection. Tiny snuff bottles like this one, which is 4 centimeters, are sometimes referred to as ladies' bottles, since they were used by the females of the court. And this one is in the show. In most cases, I will be showing you both sides of each bottle. In some cases, the identifying marks as well, but not all bottles have these. I want you to be aware of the material used and how the maker approached it. His first concern is the medium. For instance, a stone with an inherent shape, a matrix, or an overlay. His job is the revealing of the natural beauty of the materials. A bit of historical background. Snuff is simply finely ground or levigated tobacco, which was meant to be snuffed up the nose. Tobacco was a New World crop, originally from South America, and was first grown in the Andes around 5000 to 3000 BCE, where the leaves were chewed raw. Snuff taking predates smoking, but the smoke from burning tobacco was also inhaled through hollow animal bones in pre-Columbian South America. It was sometimes combined with hallucinogenic plant seeds and was believed to have medicinal properties, as well as helping with alertness and alleviating pain and hunger. The Spanish introduced tobacco to Europe before 1528, and Sir Walter Raleigh took the first Virginia tobacco to Europe in 1578. In our country, tobacco was used as a form of currency between the Native Americans and the colonists, referred to as brown gold. The Portuguese were the first to introduce it to Japan in 1542, and we know that by the time of the Longjing Emperor lifted the prohibition on overseas commerce in 1567, tobacco was already being clandestinely traded. Its addictive qualities were recognized even then, since it was referred to as witch weed. It didn't take long before tobacco was being grown locally in China, and everyone was addicted to the habit of both smoking pipes and taking snuff. But snuff taking was perceived as both stylish and elegant, and related to aristocratic living as opposed to pipe smoking. Next, in Europe, snuff was carried in snuff boxes made of everything from wood to gold. Here we have a gold example with an enameled portrait and set with diamonds. But these hinged open boxes did not provide the right environment for snuff in the humid climate of China, which led to the creation of the snuff bottle with a tightly fitting cork topped with a decorative collar and stopper from which a spoon fit into the bottle itself. These probably were derived from yao ping, or small bottles for holding medicines or cosmetics, since snuff was originally classified as a medicine when it was brought into China. These snuff bottles became the height of fashion at court and an important part of the tradition of paying tribute in the form of gifts. Next, just so you're familiar with the terminology, here's the basic layout of a snuff bottle, from the finial through the stopper, collar, cork, and spoon, which goes into the mouth and neck of the bottle, into its body, which usually terminates in a footed base. Snuff would be taken from the bottle with the spoon, placed in the crevasse between the thumb and index finger, and snuffed from there. So let's explore the range of snuff bottle types and the materials of which they can be made. Next, our first example is a trio of porcelain figural bottles, molded and decorated in famille rose enamels. One is a Mandarin official holding a snuff bottle in his outstretched hand. The intersection of his hat and its finial form the stopper. The other two figures are his wife and concubine, one Chinese with bound feet and the other Manchu with unbound feet, platform shoes, and Manchu dress. Both have chignons which form the stoppers. They date from 1790 to 1830 and are possibly from the imperial kilns at Jingdezhen. Next, this type of bottle would have been made in a two-part mold, with the parts then joined after their first firing, enameled, and then refired. These are snuff bottles which have been both published and exhibited a number of times and came out of the Mary and George Block collection. Next. This is another bottle in porcelain from the imperial kilns at Jingdezhen, with a coiling, scaly dragon flying through the clouds on one side and a phoenix with outstretched wings on the other. On the base is a Duogong Nianqi mark in seal script, 1821 to 1850. Dragons were the symbol of vigilance and protection, strength, goodness, and the spirit of change. The phoenix is the mythological emperor of all the birds, symbolic of the sun and warmth for the summer harvest, with obvious influence on fertility. The phoenix only appears in time of peace and prosperity. Its appearance augurs the emergence of an able ruler. Next. Also from the Jingdezhen kilns is this bottle in an underglaze of blue and white, copying a Ming painting in which a woman with a pipe converses with another woman in a garden, 1820 to 1850. In China, porcelain was defined as any ceramic ware which emits a musical sound when struck. Next. This stoneware bottle is of a different type of ceramic made of a coarser clay, which is fired at lower temperatures than porcelain. This one has a darker brown slip applied and carved over a richly patinated brown ground. It shows a mountainous landscape with a fisherman crossing a bridge, 1750 to 1820. The Chinese had received glass objects in 10 different colors from the Roman Empire in the 2nd century BCE, and a glass factory was established by Emperor Wu in the Han Dynasty in 140 BCE, but they did not know how to either roll or blow glass, so their products were ingots, which were then worked with lapidary methods. Glass was not cheap until about 1890, so it was considered a rare and valuable material on a par with semi-precious stones. Next. In 1860, the palace workshops were established by the Kangxi Emperor, and in 1680, the palace workshops were established by the Kangxi Emperor, and in 1696, the glass workshops in the Forbidden City were added, with the Jesuit father Kilian Stumpf in charge. It was in the palace workshops that the glass blowing techniques were finally mastered. The first glass snuff bottles were probably produced there. These workshops continued for over a century. This double gourd shaped glass bottle is of the yellow reserved for the imperial family because it was the favorite color of the Qianlong Emperor. This one came from the Imperial Palace workshops in Beijing, 1750 to 1795. Next. Glass has also been used in imitation of other materials in snuff bottles, things such as realgar, which was a highly poisonous but beautiful and soft mineral, mammoth tooth, which this is, and this one is in the show, stone, amber, and precious stones, all done in glass, in imitation. Next. This ruby red imperial glass snuff bottle with a jade stopper and a tiny piece of coral topping it off was one of my earliest purchases in Hong Kong. It dates from 1730 to 1800. Next. This beautiful bottle is an example of a carved overlay of white on a bright blue ground, showing gentian flowers on both sides of the bottle. It is also from the Palace Workshops in Beijing and dates 1736 to 1795. This one is not in the show, but there is a very similar one in the show. Next, another example of carved overlay done in multiple colors. One side shows a Pekingese dog and a dove, while the other has prunus, bamboo, and orchids, 1800 to 1850. In this technique, the color and smoothness of the background are what determines the quality of the piece. Next, this is a milk white glass bottle decorated with famille rose enamels, with the scene of a bird on the branch of a flowering tree. The neck has a border of lingxi heads between Artemis leaves, and the base has a 4-character blue enamel Qianlong Yangqi mark in regular script. Palace Workshops, Beijing, 1736 to 1795. Next, this lovely glass bottle is also decorated with famille rose enamels with blossoming prunus branches and 2 butterflies. It has a 3-character Guyu Xuan mark in iron red enamel. Palace Workshops, Beijing, 1767 to 1799. Next, inside painted bottles are done on both glass and crystal. These bottles were really not intended to be used for snuff, which would have both obscured the painted designs as well as destroying them. They were purely decorative. This one is glass painted using ink and watercolors, one side with a mountainous landscape and the other with various kinds of fish swimming among aquatic weeds. It is signed Yi Zhongshan and dated 1906. There is some outstanding inside painted work coming out of 5 different schools in China today. During our conference in China in 2014, we visited one in Xi'an and were allowed to try our hand at the technique. I was a total failure. Next. This bottle is crystal, very well hollowed and painted with ink and watercolors. On one side, it shows the Chou sisters seated reading a book together, and on the reverse, a poetic inscription. It is signed and dated 9th month, autumn, 1895. Next. This one is enamel on copper in famille rose enamels of blossoming peonies. It has a 4-character blue enamel Qianlong Yangxi mark in regular script on the base and is attributed to the Guangzhou Workshop, 1750 to 1795. Next. This is a gold bottle chased with a bird flying to 3 chicks in a nest on one side and a phoenix with outstretched wings on the other. It is stamped 22K carat and bears the name of the company Tin Wo, dated 1924 to 1928. The maker was Li King Yi, one of the Tin Wo Goldsmith Company in San Francisco. It was commissioned directly from the maker by Grace Nicholson. Next. Before we look at the hardstone examples, I'd like to give you a brief summary of the tools and techniques that were used in their creation. Boulders of hardstone, like jade, were cut into smaller blocks by 2 men using a wire stretched like a saw, while a 3rd person lubricated the area being cut with a gritty, watery solution. A Chinese reciprocating lathe was then used to carve out the basic bottle shape. This was an iron cutting wheel mounted on a horizontal shaft. Even in those days, they used diamond-pointed instruments to drill holes around the edges of the bottle to be shaped. It was then cut free from the block with a fine wire saw. going from one drilled hole to the next. 2 foot pedals controlled the direction of rotation. Hollowing the interior was even more problematic. A small core was cut down the center of the bottle, then broken with a sharp blow and removed. The depth of the core was crucial because it was extremely difficult to change after the fact. Special tools made of very heavy, stiff wire were then used to finish the hollowing out of the interior, along with abrasives like garnet grit. After all of this, the exterior and interior would be polished with fine emery dust, sand, or even diamond dust. The rule of thumb was that the interior of a bottle should be able to hold a volume of water whose weight equaled that of the bottle. These were called floaters because they float when placed in water. Next, this is that same set of bottles, and this is a really, truly outstanding pair of nephrite bottles in their own fitted Zeton box, both beautifully hollowed and of elegant, simple rectangular forms. The box's cover shows 5 bats encircling a show medallion, along with stylized archaic patterns. Imperial Palace Workshops, Beijing, 1736 to 1795. Bats are symbols of happiness and love, luck, and having 5 of them is a pictorial rebus representing the 5 blessings: old age, wealth, health, love, and love of virtue, and a natural death. The show is a symbol of happiness and longevity. 2 mineralogically different types of jades were used in China. Nephrite, like these, used since ancient times, which came from the Kunlun Mountains of Western China, and jadeite. Next, jadeite, which was imported from Burma starting in the mid-18th century. Jade was supposed to have curative powers and represented virtue and humanity. And this lovely jadeite bottle is a double gourd form, very well hollowed. The stone shows splashes of apple green, and it was made in the Palace Workshops, Beijing, 1770 to 1820. Next, this is a chalcedony bottle of honey tone with dark brown inclusions. It is very plain on one side, and on the other is carved to depict Meng Haoran, a Tang Dynasty poet, astride his mule, carrying a blossoming prunus branch and looking back at his attendant who follows on foot, 1750 to 1860. Next, this agate bottle of flattened rectangular form was carved to reveal a scene of a figure in a Chinese sampan with a dragon appearing above him in the clouds. Revealing this imagery from a stone's natural inclusions takes skill, inspiration, and ingenuity, 1750 to 1860. And this one is in the show. Next, this dendritic agate bottle is quite small and well hollowed to better show off the dendritic inclusions, which are fern-like and absolutely natural, 1750 to 1860. The inclusions are deposits of iron oxides and manganese in the fissures of the stone. In China, rare or interesting natural materials were not considered to need any further adornment. And this one is in the show. Next, this is a different type of agate bottle, usually referred to as thumbprint agate for obvious reasons. The coloration is very subtle, with striations of beige, peach, and white throughout. The virtuosity of the person carving the stone is evident in how well the thumbprint effect is used throughout the bottle's surface, 1750 to 1860. Next, This double gourd-shaped banded agate snuff bottle has a pink tourmaline stopper. The way the bottle has been done emphasizes the shape of the bottle and its striations. 1750 to 1860, and this one is in the show. Next, this moss agate bottle is not only colorful, but quite large, 6.2 centimeters. It is, that says 65. Anyway, it is very well hollowed, allowing the light to be diffused evenly to show off the natural agate inclusions. The hollowing of these stone bottles must have been extremely labor intensive, given the tools of the era, but it obviously affected the amount of snuff which a bottle was capable of holding, as well as the weight of the bottles like this one made of heavy stone. 1750 to 1860. Next, this is a quartz crystal bottle and has natural black tourmaline needle inclusions called rutiles. It is obviously very well hollowed, 1750 to 1860. And yes, this is in the show. Next, this is a fascinating material called pudding stone. It is a buff-colored quartz matrix with irregular pebble inclusions in tones of brown, gray, orange, and ochre, and dates from 1750 to 1860. Next, some of my favorite types of bottles, snuff bottles, are made from fossils. In my childhood summers, we used to go to Charlevoix, Michigan. Many happy hours were spent on the shores of Lake Michigan, searching for Petoskey stones, basically fossilized coral from what was an inland sea millions of years ago. And I hope you can see this. This is a Petoskey stone. This is a Petoskey stone that my mother found on the shores of Lake Michigan and had polished. And you can see the direct relationship to the bottle. And as I say, I'm sure you can imagine how excited I was to find this bottle, which is unadulterated fossiliferous limestone, AKA coral. Next. This one is a fossiliferous limestone in a reddish brown infused with a matrix of fossil inclusions radiating from the center on one side and in irregular rows on the reverse, 1750 to 1860. Next, and here is another fossiliferous limestone bottle with wonderful natural fossil inclusions. Can you imagine how excited the creator of this bottle must have been to first hold this piece of stone in his hand and realize what could be revealed? Next, this is another fossiliferous limestone bottle, but with different coloration and striking natural inclusions, suggestive of a flowering plant springing from a rocky cliff, with a bird of prey from the neck beneath the sun and misty mountains in the distance, 1750 to 1860. Next, this is another fossiliferous limestone bottle in brown stone with small natural fossilized inclusions in brown, white, and orange, 1750 to 1860. I think this one's in the show too. Next, this one is amygdaloidal basalt, a volcanic stone with irregular natural pebble-shaped inclusions in gray, green, and coral tones, which almost look like lily pads and flowers in a pond, 1750 to 1860. And this one's in the show. Next, and now we go to the organics, my other favorite type. This bottle is of amber, beautifully hollowed so that it almost glows. The sides have mock mask and ring handles. Imperial Palace Workshops, Beijing, 1750 to 1800. Amber is a symbol of courage and longevity. It was called electron by the Greeks, from which we get the word electricity, because it retains static electricity. Next. This bottle is also amber, carved in relief with a design of two boys, one resting on a rock under a willow tree and the other under a pine tree, attending a goat. It is 5.5 centimeters high with an amethyst stopper and dates to 1750 to 1820. And that this is in the show. Next. This is a cinnabar lacquer on wood bottle, carved in relief with ripe pomegranates bursting with seeds, symbol of fertility. It has its original matching stopper. Palace Workshop, 1750 to 1800. Lacquer comes from the resin of the Rus vernicifera tree, grown in China as well as other parts of Asia. Cinnabar, or red mercuric sulfide, was ground to a powder and added to lacquer as a coloring agent. It was then painted in many layers on either a brass or a wood base, with each layer having to dry thoroughly before the next was added. Finally, it was carved in ornate designs. Next. This is a very unusual example of lacquer on textile, molded and carved with a dragon encircling the neck and shoulders of the bottle, its tail coiling down on one main side. It has its original red lacquer stopper and lacquer spoon. Imperial, attributed to Fuzhou, 1760 to 1799. One method of creating these involved making a clay core, which was then wrapped in layers of lacquer-soaked fabric, allowing the individual layers to dry before adding the next. The core was then scraped away and a decorative surface layer was added. Next. Coral was another popular organic material, and this bottle is carved with two boys carrying a lotus root and a branch with a flower and a pad on one side, and another two boys on the reverse with lotus pods, 1750 to 1800. Next. This is a rare, very tiny coral snuff bottle measuring only 3.7 centimeters, a perfect little lady's bottle. Most coral bottles are carved, but this one makes its impact by virtue of its simplicity and perfect sculptural form. And this one is in the show. Next. This is a hornbill bottle with an raised inscription on one side that reads, "The nose receives the fragrant scent," and with the date of its making, 1836. The sides are highlighted by the red sheath of the cask, carved in relief with qilong with lingji in their mouths. This was attributed to Wang Baishi. Next. And this is where the previous bottle came, the material from which it came. The cask is on the upper mandible of the helmeted hornbill, which is native to subtropical Africa, Asia, and Melanesia. If you go online, you'll see a number of species of this bird, which was considered more valuable than ivory. The birds were known as the kill your mother-in-law bird because of their raucous cackle, and they were about 5 feet in length, prized not only for their casques, but also for their gorgeous white and black feathers. Lilla Perry created an added threat to their potential extinction by devoting an entire chapter in her book, Chinese Snuff Bottles, The Adventures and Studies of a Collector, to her search for the perfect hornbill bottle. The birds are now protected under the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species of Wild Flora and Fauna. Next. This jet bottle is considered both organic material and a semi-precious stone with a hardness of between 3 and 4 on the Mohs scale, so it can be brought to a high polish. Jet is very dense, a very dense black mineral, which is basically fossilized wood. The Chinese related it to amber because both are fossilized materials, and as such were symbolic of longevity. This bottle is carved continuously in low relief with the basket weave design covering its whole surface, 1800 to 1870. Next, another fascinating organic fossilized material is mammoth tooth, seen here in this bottle with natural concentric markings in warm brown tones. Mammoth tooth is one of the rarest materials in early snuff bottles, but there's no shortage of modern examples which tend to be crude in both execution and hollowing, since the material is extremely hard. This one dates to 1780 to 1850. And I did show you an example earlier of a glass imitating mammoth tooth example. Next, this bamboo node bottle has natural speckling and its original stopper. It is a lovely, simple shape which shows off the nature of the material, 1830 to 1900. This one came from the Mary and George Block collection and is now in mine. Next, this is another unusual example of an organic material, Chinese antelope horn. It is extremely well hollowed, making it quite translucent, and is beautifully shaped. Its rich toffee yellow color seems to glow, 1800 to 1880, and this one is in the show. Next, this one is a very unusual combination of coconut shell, tortoise shell, and silver, with a poem done in calligraphy and highlighted in gilt. It is a slim ovoid shape with inset tortoise shell panels on each side, which bear an incised poem of 4 lines on each side. The neck is mounted in silver with extended shoulders and a simple tubular mouth. The stopper is chalcedony with a ball finial. The poem reads, "To awaken or to be enlightened, understand the doctrine. I know there is no me. Observe the void, I see reality. A strayed heart should first awaken, otherwise you will not find peace, to apprehend or to become aware of. Along the river route, we pass Lufu. Entering the Pine Gate, we are in Huxi. One lamp suggests we become aware of the Tao when the lamplight shines on the traveler's deluded heart." Next. And finally, a truly organic example is this walnut bottle, beautifully patinated with age and fitted with an ivory collar and coral stopper, 1780 to 1880. And both of the last 2 bottles are in the show. As I'm sure you've noticed, I have referred to the Mary and George Block collection numerous times. It was the largest, 1,740 bottles, and most significant collection to go to auction in the recent past, accomplished in 10 separate sales. The collection included masterpieces in every category and sold for an unprecedented $56 million US, making it the most valuable collection ever sold at auction. Many other collections come to auction on a regular basis as collectors pass on. The collecting of snuff bottles has a cyclical feel to it, like greeting old friends in new places. One can run across newly acquired snuff bottles in one's own library. I was pleasantly surprised to learn that many of my bottles exhibited at LACMA in 2016 had been both published and exhibited in places of which I was unaware, and some of them came from the Block collection. I would like to point out that every single bottle I have cited in this lecture came from the collections of a group of members of the International Chinese Snuff Bottle Society who happen to reside in Southern California. To quote Bob Stevens in his book, The Collector's Book of Snuff Bottles, 1976, collecting, like any addiction, carries one through several stages, and few collectors, given time, can escape the desire, if not desperate compulsion, to acquire at least one outstanding example of each category of materials. The ones most wanted are the hardest to find, of course. End quote. I am still learning, reading, attending ICSBS conferences, and attempting to focus on those organics and weird stones that I love. So far, I have no intention or desire to acquire examples of each category. So I guess I'm still sane, although there are days when I wonder. Thank you all. And that's that.
Thank you, Courtney. That was wonderful. It's just unbelievable how beautiful these items are. The variations of design, color, material are unbelievable. They're truly eye candies. The most exotic material to me is that hornbill cask. I just cannot believe who was the first person thought about using that to make snuff bottles. I guess these birds use their heads. They bang to each other when they are in a battle. That's how it got so thick. Anyway, so solid. So now I have to look at beautiful birds with some respect. Another thing is how things are made always intrigue me. And Courtney talked about the Nephrite snuff bottle, how it was made, and then mentioned the water that can be inside the bottle weighs the same as the bottle itself. So the bottle will float in the water. So that's just something I thought was very interesting. Anyway, I think it's a wonderful presentation. And really, I hope people want to see our exhibition. And now, Richard, you're another collector. One thing I didn't mention, both Courtney and Richard loaned their collections to our exhibition. So you can see their collections in the current display. So it's wonderful. So Richard, would you join the discussion and talk a little bit about your experience collecting and discuss with Courtney before we open up to the floor for Q&A? Richard, please.
Well, I guess like all collectors, my path's been very similar to Courtney's. It starts out in an innocent way, and then it becomes all consuming at times, but at the end, the search continues. For me, it's always, the challenge is always the next bottle or in search of, or the chase. So after that is to the next one. But I think Courtney's lecture was very succinct. So I don't think I need to repeat anything really in terms of learning, checking provenances, working with dealers. But again, at the end of the day, is really after a while, collecting a while, your collection should reflect you. And I think it takes a while. And then it is very interesting for me to see Courtney's collection and others where personality does come through. And to me, that's a collection instead of what Courtney mentioned about the blocks. I mean, of course, a great collection, but it was more by the numbers. So when you look at the collection, 1,400 bottles, I mean, they have everything in the best of, which is one way of collecting, but you really couldn't tell what they liked. There's no strong preference. It was so that's pretty much my collecting journey. It continues.
What about your early experience, how you first got into it? I know both of you sort of fell into the hobby, but I don't know, by accident or by purpose or whatever. It was always an interesting story how you got into it.
I think it's probably more accidental. I mean, I don't think one starts with saying, I'm going to collect snuff bottles. I don't think that happens. I think you mentioned earlier, I was just fascinated by some miniature inside painted bottles at the beginning. And the more I looked into it, I mean, I was just amazed at the amount of variety. I think that was part of the lure, is that there's so many types, bottles, shapes, styles. It covers pretty much the realm of Asian art. I mean, Chinese history of art. I mean, you have to, at the end, because that's why I was saying it's really hard to learn everything, because it covers pretty much the entire spectrum of Chinese art. You got to know the stone, the jades, the ceramics, the glass. So it's really a history lesson when you collect the snap bottles. So, but I think that's what attracted me, is the scale of things, the craftsmanship that went into these little snap bottles, and of course the history. Once you get into the history of the bottles and how they're made, yeah, just lots of options.
What about those international Chinese snuff bottle societies that you guys belong to? I think you get a lot out of it. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, I mean, it is a really, really interesting group of people, I think. Would you agree with that, Richard?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you'll meet a whole spectrum of people, types, income levels, because they're truly, seriously, majorly,
they tend to be
collectors, and you're like, why am I here sometimes? But it's fun because you meet people from all over the world, all walks of life, and a lot of different interests. And sometimes the only thing common you have is snap bottles. So it's really interesting.
Tend to be very well educated and wealthy, and focused on collecting snuff bottles. And some of them only collect one specific type of snuff bottle, like inside paint. They're just a really interesting group of people. And I love the fact that they literally, for our conferences, they come from all over the world. I mean, Australia, Norway, all over Europe, all over the United States and Canada, and China, of course.
But the interesting is that the plus is really you make friends for life. I mean, that you would never meet otherwise. I have great friends from all over the world now.
I know you've been to visit Per in
Norway. I mean, Norway, Toronto, just a few weeks ago, just to look at a friend's collection. So it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So the friendships you make along the way are obviously a big.
Yes, I think when you have the same hobby, it makes a friendship very, very strong and long lasting.
Yeah, my son Sean, who is now 38 years old, 37, 38, somewhere right in there. Anyway, he came. We had a half yearly conference in Torrance in May, right?
Yeah.
And I was one of the speakers at the conference. So Sean came down for that, and he really enjoyed it. So he's going to come to Portugal with me, because he likes my snuff bottles. I mean, I did kind of, I was aware when I first started collecting them that there were a number of men who collected snuff bottles. And I've been focused on the organics and the what I refer to as weird stones, the hard stones. So they seem to be a little more, in many cases, a little more masculine than some of the other types of bottles, and he really likes them. So I'm thrilled that he's coming to Portugal with me.
I think we have some questions. I guess Elizabeth is monitoring questions. Maybe we can have people ask questions. I don't know if it's in chat or people raise hands.
that, so I don't see any hands raised, but right off the bat, we have 3 questions. So Lorraine states, so interesting and informative. She's interested to know how the inside is hollowed out, what the tools look like. Courtney, could you speak a little bit to that?
Well, that's a good question. I did talk about that in terms of the hard stones, but I haven't really seen images of the tools that they used. I've only read descriptions of them. I know that I'm a goldsmith, so a lot of the things that they referred to, I recognize because they're things that I use in goldsmithing as well. When you're working with certain materials, you might use a garnet grit because it's a very abrasive type of grit, and you might use garnet grit to achieve a certain contour that you're trying to get. And the diamond pointed tools are still used by jewelers today. So it's when they talk about the core, and cutting down through the center of the bottle, and having to get just to the right spot, because once you break that core out, it's almost impossible to go further. And then going down into the core with other types of tools, with heavy stiff wire tools, and hollowing out the sides from the inside. I just can't even imagine how difficult that must have been in the old days. I'm sure it's today you could do the same thing much faster because of the kinds of tools that we have available.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that your response also addressed a question that was asked by Evelyn, who was also interested to know a little bit more about the tools and I guess maybe kind of get a visual of them. There's another question from Alan, who's interested to know if snuff bottles are being bought by the domestic Chinese market, like many other types of art, furniture, ceramics. Could either address that?
Could you repeat that question?
So Alan is interested to know if snuff bottles are also being purchased by the domestic market in China, like other types of Chinese art and furniture.
I am fairly sure they are. What about you, Richard? What do you think?
Most definitely. The last 10 years, there's been 15 years, as China becomes wealthier, there's a strong, as the middle class is being established, I think there's more disposable income. So there's been a lot of interest in snuff bottles because there's an entry level point for everybody based on material and type. So we've had quite an increase of membership from China. So, and they are interestingly, their interests, each region has their own interests, which is kind of surprising. But in Singapore, as an example, they're really into contemporary inside painted bottles. They like inside painted bottles in general. China, the same way. They like the contemporary inside painted bottles, and they like anything that's mark and period, meaning imperial bottles. So that they have a strong preference for those kind of bottles. So, so yeah, definitely we've met a lot of people from China who are passionate about snuff bottles, and also they're dealers of snuff bottles in China and Hong Kong, really.
I'm reading through these questions.
More questions?
but a lot of them are just statements, not questions.
Right. We did get a lot of comments about it. I think that there's a lot of appreciation for the images and the objects that were shown as part of the presentation. So there's a question from Pamela. I think that maybe this refers to the show. She's interested to know if there are examples of ceramic bottles from Yixin.
Yes, yes, there are.
Someone asked if they're now used for cocaine. Gee, I hope not.
I see a question from, I guess, Pamela. Are there examples of? Oh, wait a minute. I saw another one. I saw on the bottom there's another one.
Okay, so another question from Annette. With demand increasing, how prevalent are counterfeit bottles? Is it something that you guys notice a lot, or people in the society notice?
I don't understand.
The last journal of the Chinese Snuff Bottle Society, there was a whole article on fakes, and so yeah, there is a lot of that going on, but so you have to be careful, and that's one of the things about being a member of the International Chinese Snuff Bottle Society. You get to know the best snuff bottle dealers in the world, and you can be pretty damn sure when you're buying something from them that it, you know, they have their own reputations to look after, so you can be sure that what you're getting is what they say it is. Would you
also
agree with that?
Then there's also a return policy.
Yes.
So, and then, so there are all these guarantees that are available to you, but there are a lot of fakes. So
but I guess you have to buy from a reputable dealer. Otherwise, who is giving you the the guarantee?
I would say, to answer your question, generally, yes. Or auctions, even though auctions,
yeah, you can get.
I've had experience where they're not, the people that work at the auction houses are not snuff bottle collectors, or so they sometimes they miss and they do have oversights. So you have to go by your experience, and I've made mistakes by looking at just the pictures, and because of the pandemic, buying online, which is not something I would recommend. If at all possible, I think you need to look and touch and feel the bottles, because there's another dimension that you get when you're handling the bottle. So yeah, and I think just comes with time, and you see enough, you attend enough seminars. I think seeing it, just as many bottles as possible, you get a feel of what's right and what's wrong. Some of them are so bad that anybody pretty much could tell. But again, it's
here's an interesting one from Ralph Flick. He says snuff bottles are considered as minor arts in China. The acme lasted about 300 years in the Qing dynasty. Jade is rarely used for snuff bottle making. Were the jade snuff bottles shown tested to be real? Well,
I can answer that generally.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, okay. Chinese snuff bottles are considered as a minor art in China, because it's now one of the 5 arts forms, which is glass, jade, calligraphy, and I forget the others. So it's really not truly appreciated as an art form. I consider it a minor art because I think it's due to lack of exposure, because it's been really from the 60s on, a truly Western taste, meaning a Western collections. A lot of the collections are based in the US and Europe and not China until very recently. And there's a lot of books out, articles out regarding how involved the Qianlong Emperor was in making of the bottles. So there is a strong imperial connection to these bottles because they were made mostly as favors or gifts to officials, dignitaries. And if you look at all the texts, read all the texts, as an example, jade, since you brought it up, jade was rare, highly prized. So a lot of the early jade bottles are not of the highest quality. They're usually secondary class, I guess, or whatever. So, but I mean, so then it progressed to the taste changing to the real pure white bottles that are really in favor right now. But what I'm getting at is, in the early days, it's been documented that the emperor would order so many types of bottles. Let's say porcelain, I think is a perfect example. He would order so many for a festival, and the artist will make, and he'll dictate the style of the bottle, or the subject, and they will make samples for him to look at, and he will make comments, too much, not bright enough, add more blue, too busy, less busy, and then they will go back and make the corrections per his orders. So there is proof that, you know, the emperors are involved in the making of the bottles. But I think I consider it as a fine art form because there were workshops that were making these bottles. I mean, imperial workshops that were making these bottles. So it's not like it's making, I mean, at a later date when it became so popular, the middle class became more affluent, the scholar. I mean, there were other workshops, but it started primarily in the palace workshops. So it's just a matter of, I think, exposure to the East, but it's happening.
He also said that jade was rarely used in snuff bottle making. I don't think that's accurate. I've seen a lot of jade snuff bottles, and the snuff bottles that I showed you today were outstanding examples, and they were definitely jade. There's no question about it. I mean, that pair of snuff bottles in the Zitan box is outstanding. I mean, there is no question that pair of bottles is jade.
But I think in the 18th century, early 18th century, I think jade bottles were very rarer. But as the taste changed and it became more available, there's a huge amount of jade bottles made in the 19th century, even late 18th to 19th, early 20th.
I have another.
I was just saying, somebody asking. Sorry.
Okay,
Courtney, go ahead.
There's another bottle of mine that's in the show that's quite small that is jade, and no question about it, it's jade.
To answer the question,
there's another question that's pretty interesting that I think people should know. She says, are there certain materials that can no longer be traded, such as ivory, etc.? And the answer is yes. If you buy, for instance, if you buy a snuff bottle that has an ivory spoon from a European dealer, they are required to remove that spoon before they send it to you. And then you have to replace the spoon yourself with something else.
Wow. They can trade the bottle, but not the spoon.
Correct.
If the spoon is ivory. Wow.
They would not be able to sell you an ivory bottle.
Well, hornbill is one of them, and then rhinoceros horn.
Yeah.
So is hornbill also on this list?
No, actually, you can still find hornbill bottles.
Wow.
But most of them were made in the 60s as a response to Lilla Perry's book. Yeah. So I have one of those that, it's from the 60s. But Anyway,
Another person is asking, is there provenance to go with the bottle when you purchase?
you mean, well, yes, in
Like
terms of,
history, yeah, who owned it?
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Sometimes it's hard to come by the provenance. Not all
Yeah.
dealers give you accurate information about the provenance of the bottles, but they are supposed to.
I think provenance is one of the most important things right now.
Right.
Because that, so most auction houses and dealers will provide provenance. And my side interest is provenance. So it's kind of interesting. And after buying a bottle, I mean, I could be flipping through, like Courtney was saying, an old journal or something. I'll see that bottle. That's not, stated in the dealer's invoice. So I've got bottles that go back 5, 6, 7 owners, just through casual looking at old journals and articles. So it's really important, and it's a lot of fun to trace the provenance. As an example, the blue bottle the glass bottle with the 2 gentian flowers in the exhibit now. I was having dinner. I mean, I'll make it real short. I was having dinner with a friend. He said, "There's an auction tomorrow, some obscure auction house in Michigan. You got to look to it." I got home at 10. I registered online, called them in the morning. Please make sure I'm registered. And it was that bottle that I wanted because I didn't know the provenance, but I just loved it. And I had to pry away from a meeting, excuse myself during bidding to go bid on this bottle. But long story short, it turned out to be a bottle from early Los Angeles collector. And then he passed on. It went to auction in London. And then from auction in London, a Michigan collector from the ICSBS bought it. He passed on and nobody knew about it. So it went to an obscure jewelry auction house. And that's when I got it. So I traced it back 5 times. So yeah, there's information available now with the internet and all the, like I said, published books and just collecting old journals. I mean, I think it's really important. And I think a lot of collectors do appreciate it because it was, because all the fakes or replicas that are being produced right now.
Here's another interesting comment. Virginia Olson, who is one of the people who has bottles in the show, inherited the bottles from her, I think, her parents. And she's saying, what if you inherited the bottles? Well, I guess it's a matter of, are you truly interested in them or not? And if you are, then there's lots of research that you can do that will educate you about what you have and help you make decisions about whether you want to hang on to the bottles or whether you want to sell them at auction. And for instance, there's one of our members who lives in Holland, I believe. Is that right, Richard?
Yeah, good thought.
Yeah, she inherited a collection from her father, and I believe they were all inside painted. Is that correct?
Mostly contemporary inside painted bottles.
Yeah, but she's really launched into that and educated herself on it and done all the research necessary to catalog that entire collection. Because
it's on our website. It's on our website. There's a website for that, which is a great resource for contemporary inside painted bottles.
So she's really taken that on and educated herself on the whole collection and done a great job, I'd say. So it just really it's a matter of, do you love them or not? And if you don't love them, there are plenty of auction houses out there that would be happy to sell your bottles for you. So are there any other questions that?
Yeah, do you guys have any more questions? If not, I think we can finish this. I think it has been a wonderful presentation. conversation, and we hope you continue joining our next Chinese American Experience and Beyond lecture.